Thanks for joining the Apologist bookshelf again. Gary Zacharias here. This is a book that has not been out all that long. Let me see what the date of it is. It's called Why God Makes Sense in a World That Doesn't. The author is Gavin Ortlund. It came out in 2021, so pretty up to date. And the subtitle is The Beauty of Christian Theism. And so he takes on, once again, that difficult topic, but how do you explain the idea of God? How can you make sense out of that? And he has a quote at the beginning here that says, the first thing that must strike a non-Christian about the Christian's faith is that it obviously presumes far too much. It's too good to be true. Isn't that interesting? It's too good to be true. I always thought that's a really effective way to talk to somebody who's not a Christian, to say, well, let's do this. Let's make this a two-parter. First part is, let's look at what Christianity promises. And then we talk about the things that come about, like meaning and forgiveness and things like that. And if those are all good things that people want in their lives, then the question is, can Christianity deliver on that? Is it real? Is it true? So that's pretty much what he's doing in this book here. And so it's got sections here. One's called The Cause of the World, why something is more plausible than nothing. And then the second chapter is the one I wanted to look at. It's called The Meaning of the World, why things like math, music, and love make more sense if there is a God. And the third section is The Conflict of the World, why good and evil shape the plot of every story you've ever heard. And then the last one, The Hope of the World, why Easter means happiness beyond your wildest dreams. So this author, I think, does such an excellent job, and a lot of people are commenting on it favorably. Here's a man who's a seminary professor. In a few short years, Ortlund has become one of the world's leading Christian scholars. Writing from the heart, he shows us the imminent plausibility of the existence of God and of the resurrection of Jesus. Here's a professor from Houston Baptist University. This is the ideal book to give thoughtful unbelievers, and one that believers will find most useful as a model for intelligent evangelism in the 21st century. And so if we all want to defend the coherence and the beauty and the power of the Christian story, this is a good book to take a look at. Oh, I forgot one more, Paul Copan. I like Paul. We've talked to him. He's been involved with our church in the past. A marvelous, engaging book that defends the coherence, beauty, and power of the Christian story. So I hope you consider this book. I'll just tell you this. Part of it is a little bit more difficult than maybe your typical apologetics book, but it's well worth it. Gavin Ortlund is a scholar. He's a pastor. He's a writer. It says on the back he was a senior pastor at a church in Ojai, California, but now I looked him up. He now leads something called Truth Unites. So if you want to check out Gavin Ortlund. Like I said, I want to take a look at Chapter 2, The Meaning of the World, why things like math, music, and love make more sense if there is a God. And there's so much here, I may break this into 2 podcasts because there's a lot of material. And he brings up something at the very beginning that I talk about in some of my talks, and that is the idea that there is a transcendent meaning behind the universe. And he said, what does he mean by transcendent? Something external to the physical world, by which it's ordered and from which it receives significance and value and purpose. So it says transcendent meaning is what a book has because there's an author. So I think that's an interesting way to put it. I do a talk on artificial intelligence, and I bring up the idea that we've lost in our society, and frankly, I think around the world, but we've lost here in the U.S., a belief in the transcendent, that there's something beyond this material universe that gives it meaning, that gives it significance, and gives us meaning, gives us significance. And as we've lost that, it's really degraded our society. We have loneliness and despair and all sorts of things. All right, so that's what his opening point is, that there's something transcendent. He believes that if we embrace that it brings beauty and brings meaning to our lives. Now, he talks first about design in the universe, and I think I'll go beyond that because I've done that before several times in different podcasts. And I like it because he has actually quotes here from people like Paul Davies. He's an agnostic, and he's a physicist. And he said, I belong to the group of scientists who do not subscribe to a conventional religion, but nevertheless deny that the universe is a purposeless accident. Through my scientific work, I've come to believe more and more strongly that the physical universe is put together with an ingenuity so astonishing that I cannot accept it merely as brute fact. There must, it seems to me, be a deeper level of explanation. Whether one wishes to call that deeper level God is a matter of taste and definition. And then another place, Davy says, there is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. The impression of design is overwhelming. All right, so I'll just leave it alone at that. But a lot dealing there with just the beauty of the design, everything from our bodies, what's going on inside of us with our little molecular machines and all the things the cell is doing all the time, out to the edge of the universe and how things have to be just right for life to be here. Okay, he even discusses the multiverse, which I've done elsewhere, and so I will skip over that. But let me pick up with the second part of his argument, is the argument from math. And somebody said, he has a math text author, Davis, who says, if you do math every day, it seems the most natural thing in the world. If you stop to think about what you're doing and what it means, it seems one of the most mysterious. Isn't that interesting? So there seems to be something, and he mentions Tom Nagel, who says there seems to be something not only in the physical world, but there's a mental reality that we all experience from the inside. And so the author here, Ortlund, is saying that for a lot of people, there are two kinds of things. There are mental things and material things. He said philosophers say that as well. And so that makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the physical universe is all there is, why should there be these two realms? Why do mental things exist? Why isn't everything just material? That's an interesting way to put it, huh? It says that would include things like what's in this mental world, what's in this mental thought, things like math, numbers, sets, functions, logical laws. I mean, so all of these things we believe really exist. But where do they exist? Well, they don't exist in this physical world. You can't pick up a pound of logical law, can you? So he says, let's look at math. He says 3 things about it seem curious if you're a naturalist. In other words, you believe the universe is all there is. 1 is its permanence and durability. 2, its elegance and beauty. And 3, its applicability and its usefulness. All right, so how about number 1? It said it has a durability, doesn't it? Mathematical truths exist independently of human minds. I mean, think about it. If the entire human race was wiped out somehow, would mathematical truths still exist? Yeah, no doubt about it. So he spends some time on that, and I won't cover a lot of this, but he said many mathematicians, for example, if you want to think about math being here permanently and being durable, he said, many mathematicians speak of discovery when they're looking at math. Now, discovery suggests it was out there all the time, and then we just came upon it. Right? So I think that's an interesting way to put about it. He said, if you're doing math, that's different than like discovering things out in the world, like some of the early discoverers did as they went around the world. He said he likes to use this thought experiment to think about durability of math. If the entire space-time universe were to collapse into non-being, would it still be the case that 2 + 3 = 5? Well, yeah, what else could it be? But then he says, you notice that means the truth of 2 + 3 = 5 is somehow independent of physical reality. So, he says, if physical reality is all that there is, where do we get this durability? Yeah, that's a good point. Says it's awfully hard to figure out why a finite space-time universe that's constantly in flux, things are going on out there, how does it produce a mental realm characterized by eternal necessary truths? Where'd that realm come from? How does this temporal world, this universe, produce the permanent? Okay, so I think that's a good point. So that's the first feature. The math is permanent, seems to be durable. And then he gets to the second one, which I think is fascinating because I'm not a mathematician, and it kind of gives me the creeps to think about doing a lot of mathematics. I did okay with it in high school, and then college got a little tougher, and now I'm so glad I'm not a mathematician. But it's wonderful that we have them out there. All right, so it's amazing that there are math truths out there. They seem to be permanent. They seem to be durable. Here's the second point. There's an elegance involved. There's a beauty to it. Isn't that interesting? Said, what makes a mathematical formula beautiful? So, well, mathematicians speak of it as beautiful when they're dealing with equations and all, a formula, when they're unusually simple, or maybe they're orderly, or maybe they have a surprising wide range of applicability, like the Pythagorean theorem. So he said you can find it all over the place, mathematicians who talk about encountering beauty when they discover math. And he gives an example. There's a book, I guess it was a movie as well, I didn't see it. It's called A Beautiful Mind. It's the story of the math genius John Nash. Said a fellow student was entranced with one of Nash's ideas, not because it had an application, but because it was elegant. And here's a quote, and this is from the book. The mathematics was so beautiful, it was so right mathematically. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's interesting. Why should it be so? Why is math exciting? And he says he thinks it's a point of contact with something, capital S, beyond nature. And so that's the second point, right? So math is permanent, it's durable, it seems to outlast us. How's that possible? It seems to outlast the universe. It's elegant, it's beautiful. And then this third point, it has great application. It's so useful. He said we can't deny how incredibly useful math is. It said allows us to make predictions and do all sorts of mathematics to understand what's going on out there. In fact, some people say it's a miracle. Einstein delivered a lecture. He said, an enigma presents itself, which in all ages has agitated inquiring minds. How can it be that mathematics, being after all a product of human thought, which is independent of experience, is so admirably appropriate to the objects of reality? Okay, so there we go. We got those three things going on when it comes to math. So he says math seems to suggest there's something beyond this world because math is permanent, it's elegant, and it has great usefulness. Now, I don't know if that sways anybody out there, and so that's the point of this book, is he gives you, he piles up all sorts of evidence for the possibility of a spiritual realm, a God realm beyond this world. So that's his first point in this chapter. Math can give you an idea of there may be a God. Here's the second area. It's the language, he calls it the language of angels, the argument from music. And then he offers a suggestion. I just did that this morning. He said, before you read this section, I suggest you listen to Hans Zimmer, the man who's written so many wonderful scores for movies and all. He has a piece called Chevaliers de Sangreal, and I probably butchered that, but I'll spell it for you because I just listened to it. You can go to YouTube and just have a listen. I'll tell you what's amazing about it. I don't want to give it away. It's just a beautiful piece of music. But it also, I looked at the notes that people commented, after they listened to it on YouTube. I always love looking at the comments of people. Over and over, people talked about it bringing tears to their eyes, to stirring them on the inside and bringing something that touched their souls. So again, it's called Chevalier. So Chevaliers, Chevaliers de Sangreal, Sangreal. So listen to it if you can. It is just amazing. So he said, there seems to be something to do with music. He said it's a great source of transcendence, music and the other arts. He said just music feels important. It feels grand. It feels palatial. He says almost like it's conveying something to us way too poignant for words. It's a haunting beauty from another world, and you'll see that if you look at the comments of people that listen to Hans Zimmer's Chevalier. He said for some, he said music points to God himself. He said it comes up pretty often on the existence of God. And he said you actually hear atheists treating arguments from music more seriously than other arguments. That's interesting. Here's one that says in a debate with a man named Jerry Walls, who's a theist, an atheist said this. He said, sometimes listening to Cat Stevens, right? So that's my time period, Cat Stevens. I don't know if you've listened to any of his stuff. So this atheist in a debate said he listened to Cat Stevens' song "Morning Has Broken" and said his deep agnosticism became a lot less certain. All right, so it said Steve Jobs listened to Yo-Yo Ma play Bach on an old Stradivarius, said he teared up and he told him, "Your playing is the best argument I've ever heard for the existence of God, because I don't really believe a human alone can do this." And then how about Leonard Bernstein, the great conductor? So he loved Beethoven. And he said, this is part of his comment about Beethoven, "Our boy has the real goods." Talking about Beethoven, the stuff from heaven, the power to make you feel at the finish something is right in the world. There's something that checks throughout, that follows its own law consistently, something we can trust that will never let us down. And somebody said, but that's almost the definition of God. And Bernstein said, I meant it to be. All right, then there's Rebecca McLaughlin. I've read her material. She told of an Iranian science professor and a musician. He became a Christian. And how did he become a Christian? Through Johann Sebastian Bach. So he listened to that, and he became convinced by listening that there's a Christian fabric underneath Bach's works. And when he went into church then, a few years later, he sensed that same reality. There's a philosopher, Peter Kreeft, and maybe you've heard of him, Kreeft. He gives an argument for God's existence from Bach. Here's what he said: "There is the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, therefore there must be a God. You either see this or you don't." Now, he may be kind of toying around with that, but I like that idea. They said, if you just think of naturalism, that the universe is all there is, then the power of music is just part of evolutionary history. It just affects the same part of our brain like sex and food. But here's the key thing. It doesn't have any obvious survival function. So why does it affect us so emotionally? Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it said it just seems authentic to think that it's evolution. It says it's difficult to sit there and enjoy music while you're thinking, my brain is tricking me into the experience of transcendence. I enjoy this just because it intersects with factors that help animals survive. That doesn't make any sense. It says, of course, evolutionary factors could explain, do they have any explanatory power at all? No, he says, not really. He said, so what's the alternative? If the transcendence is not deceptive, but maybe it's actually a clue to reality. And of course, that's where he wants to come down. So he said, if you're a theist, you believe there's a God, the world itself could be seen as a work of art or music. It's a creation of a personal agent. In fact, I always think of the book of Ephesians, chapter 2, verse 10. I've always loved this verse. It says, we are God's workmanship. So God is an artist, and he's created us, and he's created the world. And so he said, from a theistic perspective, the world itself is like a work of art or music. So music is a reflection of the Creator. So he says Christians have often attributed metaphysical significance to music. Think about the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis wrote. The author here, Ortland, says Lewis attached a similar significance to music when the world was created. Aslan, who's the Christ figure of that world, sings the world into being. And there are other voices that join in, and they appear to be the stars themselves. So he said, so what are we stuck with? Well, if you're a naturalist, the alternative is pretty bleak. Music is just an accidental product of nature. But for the theist, it's the deliberate producer of nature. So I think that's a really good way to think about it. So I don't know, let's see. I think maybe I will stop along about here, because I want to cover in another podcast what he says about the argument from love. So I think that's interesting. Maybe I'll end here then. There are a couple other comments talking about C.S. Lewis again, and he talked about the longing. Said if you believe in a world beyond nature, this is Ortland now, if you believe in a world beyond nature with a possibility of heaven, music could not be just, it's not a trick that evolution has given us. It could be the way that we could experience a connection to this realm, to God's realm. He said, Think of it this way. A musical piece, it stirs our hearts. And what does it do? It suggests that maybe, if there's a God, that this is what will one day happen to the whole world. So he says, for a naturalistic view, music's like an opiate for a dying man. It's pleasant. It distracts us from reality. Music is pleasant. It's beautiful, but reality is chaotic and dark. So music just pulls us away from the way things really are. Well, contrast that with a theistic view. Music is a window, like a window to an imprisoned man. It's a portal into ultimate reality. It's a little glimmer that maybe there's more out there. It's a way that transcendence and ultimate reality reaches down to us, even though we may be in a prison cell somewhere. So he said, imagine a man locked away, underground. It's dark, stuffy. He has no clue what the outside world is like, but he looks up and he sees light coming in, and he thinks there's got to be something more. So he ends the chapter by saying, what if music and that longing that it gives us is like that window? What if we're the man in the cellar? So we see that light coming through and we go, there's got to be something more. And he says music can do that to us. It stirs our soul, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. Music, if you're a naturalist, you just have to say, well, it's just wavelengths that hit our ear, and our brain interprets it a certain way. But, I mean, that just takes all the joy out of it. I've seen people, I'll give you one example. There's a man named Andre Rieu who does a lot of major orchestral work and takes his orchestra and his singers all over the world. And in this one city, he was doing Amazing Grace, the song Amazing Grace. And it was a major city in Europe, someplace, I forgot which one, maybe Berlin. And they focused on the audience as the song was being played. And there were people with tears coming down from listening to that song. And these were obviously well-to-do people. They were dressed up nicely. But there's something about music that can really touch our souls. All right, well, that's just one part of Gavin Ortland's book, Why God Makes Sense in a World That Doesn't. And I think he does an excellent job. And like they said, this might be something you would give to somebody who's a real thinker, who wants to process the idea of God and is willing to give this book a try. So I appreciate you listening, and let's do another podcast soon.